The United Nations has published its eagerly anticipated weapons inspectors report from Syria. It points to clear and convincing evidence that chemical weapons were used in the Damascus area last month. This comes as Britain, France and the United States have warned of military consequences if Syria fails to destroy its arsenal, as it has now promised to do.
After 2.5 years of tragedy, now is the time for the Security Council to show leadership and exercise its moral and political responsibilities. There must be accountability for the use of chemical weapons. Any use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, is a crime. But our message today must be more than that. Do not slaughter your people with gas. There must be also no impunity for the crimes being committed with conventional weapons.
UN Secretary General there speaking, Ban Ki-moon. Now, I've been joined here in the studio by Dr. Alexander Coker. He is a former chief inspector with the UN Chemical Weapons Group in Iraq. So, Alexander, this was a very, very conclusive report made by the weapons inspectors in Syria. Give us an idea of what they found that makes them have such strong conclusions.
There's no question, because they actually found sarin. They actually found the chemical itself, which is very surprising since it's been there for several days in a very hot country. And it has a high, it evaporates very easily. So for it to still be there is why I think one of the main reasons they're saying that this was quite a large usage of sarin. Apart from that, they found degradation products, synthesis products, lots of indicators of sarin.
And is it possible, though, to say, the UN ambassador, Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vitaly Churkin, said, OK, but there's no scientific proof that Assad forces used this sarin gas. I mean, you can't say who used it, can you? Based on this report, what's in this report? No. Even if there was well-known if a military had used it, they would probably use stabilizers, because they have to store it for a long time. And if somebody who's like a rogue nation or terrorist group, they probably wouldn't do that. Just make it and use it. But more like a cottage industry kind of thing. So since there's no stabilizers that were evidenced, I'm not saying they weren't used, but I didn't see any evidence of known stabilizers there. It makes it even less. If there were stabilizers, you could say, now it's looking pretty strong that this is a military who's made this to keep it for a long time. There are no stabilizers that I noticed in the report, so it could be anybody. But would you also look, it's not just the sarin gas, but it's the means by which it was actually used and dispersed? The fact that it's in a munition, in a weaponized rocket, it tells you that there's a certain level of sophistication there. But I mean, if we're just trying to be objective here, you could have got it from another nation who gave it to these people. Or it's not entirely beyond the capability of somebody to do that. It's difficult, definitely difficult. And it definitely looks more likely that it would be Syria than the rebels, but it's not conclusive. Okay. And now, obviously, all the focus is on making sure that Bashar al-Assad relinquishes his entire chemical weapons arsenal. Easier said than done. It's easier said than done, but in my experience from Iraq, the first thing you should always do is just take what you're given first. So he's told them he's going to give them the chemical weapons and the precursors and stuff. First, destroy those. You'll go to the facilities, you'll see how he's stored those, you'll see how he's manufactured those. You'll be able to get some ideas of how he goes about this. Does he use, is it very safe? Are the facilities that he uses these, are they well guarded? Are they well ventilated? Is safety a key issue? Or is it just limited safety? If it's limited safety, he could be doing it anywhere. But if he's taken a lot of high precautions in making these things, then the logic is that he probably would have done it more. And that was true of Iraq. They built it in isolated areas. They weren't the safest in the world, but they weren't completely careless of their people. Because if you are, people will die. I mean, that's what happened with one of the indicators for the Libyan chemical weapons plant was that animals died when they dumped stuff outside. That was one of the clearest, the imagery showed it. So, I mean, they have things to help them. Imagery, which I'm sure the US and the French will help them. Sure. They've got intelligence agencies that will help them.
most of this stuff is probably going to have come from the West. So they can contact the people who supplied
Easier
the
to
ones.
trace it.
Yeah. So there is ways of going
All
about
right.
it.
Alexander Coker, thanks very much indeed for sharing your experience and knowledge about the work of a chemical weapons inspector at the UN. Do stay with us on BBC World News.